Hello and welcome back to Realpolitik Confidential. I'm your host Alex Krishan and this is the 11th episode of our series. Today it is the 8th of July 2025 and today's episode is titled Blood, Minerals and the Great Game. Is Congo on the brink? Let's get started. Well, deep in the heart of Central Africa lies a land both blessed and cursed, the Democratic Republic of Congo. By size and riches alone, the DRC should be a giant, a nation with enough cobalt, gold, coltan and copper beneath its soil to power the global economy for decades to come. The world's green revolution, the smartphone in your hand, the battery in your next car, all run on minerals from the Congo. In pure value, its untapped resources are estimated at over $24 trillion. Yet, for most Congolese, these riches are not a blessing but a torment. Today, more than 21 million people need urgent humanitarian assistance, and over 6 million have died since 1996 in a series of wars that have earned Congo the tragic nickname the world's deadliest conflict since World War II. In 2025, as we record this episode, the country stands on the edge once again, perhaps closer than ever to state collapse. The violence has flared, fiercest in the east of the country. Rebel armies, led by the notorious M23 group and allegedly backed by neighboring Rwanda, have swept across the North and South Kivu, seizing major cities, displacing hundreds of thousands. Rwanda under President Paul Kagame is accused by UN experts of sending thousands of troops across the border, stoking an insurgency that now threatens to split Congo in two. Government in Kinshasa is fighting desperately to hold the country together. UN peacekeepers, once slated to leave, are again a last line of defense, their presence both resented and, for now, desperately needed. Beneath the battle lies a simple, brutal truth. Congo's chaos is anything but accidental. It is a war for control over the world's most valuable minerals. A war fought in the shadows by foreign powers, multinational corporations, PMCs and local warlords alike. As tech giants and electric car companies rush to secure the supply chains of tomorrow, a new scramble for Africa is underway, and Congo is its most valuable prize. But is this the tipping point? Are we witnessing the first act of Congo's disintegration? Another balkanization by force of arms? Or can this battered giant defy history and claw its way back from the edge, forging a new, more just future for its people? Tonight, we break down the truth behind the headlines. The battles for Goma, Bukavu and the Great Lakes, the mineral rush fueling global industries and child labor, the shadow games played by corporations and mercenaries, Rwanda's ambitions and the risk of a regional war, and above all, what Congo's fate means for Africa and the world at large. This is Realpolitik Confidential episode 11, and I'm your host, Alex Krishan. Welcome to the Crucible. Let's get started. Let's start with a war on many fronts. Eastern Congo erupting. The DRC's eastern provinces, notably North Kivu, South Kivu, and Ituri, are engulfed in a multifaceted war. In late 2024 and early 2025, a dramatic escalation occurred as the M23 rebel group launched a major offensive. By January 2025, the Tutsi-led M23 rebels, allegedly backed by neighboring Rwanda, seized Goma, the largest city in the eastern DRC, and even Bukavu in South Kivu. This was the worst upsurge in fighting in a decade. Between 900 and 2,000 people were killed in the battle for Goma, and over 500,000 were displaced in just a few weeks. On top of an existing 1.2 million displaced during the earlier fighting, the fall of these provincial capitals sent shockwaves through the region and risks triggering a wider regional war, as observers have warned previously. Memories are still fresh of the devastating Second Congo War, which was fought during the time span of 1998 to 2003, when armies from Zimbabwe, Angola, Uganda, Rwanda and others turned Congo into a battleground, resulting in some 5 to 6 million deaths from combat, hunger and disease. Today, analysts see ominous parallels as foreign-backed militias carve up territory once again. The role of Rwanda in this conflict is central and controversial alike. The Rwandan government of President Paul Kagame stands accused of using the M23 rebels as a proxy force to secure its interest in the eastern Congo. UN investigators have documented that 3,000 to 4,000 Rwandan troops operate in the DRC in support of the M23 rebel group. Rwanda's direct combat support, including elite troops and advanced weaponry, has enabled M23's battlefield gains. Kigali officially denies backing the rebels, but evidence of its involvement is increasingly evident. Regional powers Uganda and Burundi have also been implicated to lesser degrees. Uganda has its own security operation in Congo against the ISIS-linked ADF militia, and Burundi has sent forces to back the Congolese army. The myriad of actors creates a geopolitical powder keg in the Great Lakes region, as one report has previously described it. Ethnic tensions further inflame the conflict. M23 claims to defend Congolese Tutsis, such as the Banyamulenge community, against other militias, while critics say this is a cover for Rwanda's geopolitical and economic ambitions. Meanwhile, the Congolese National Army, or the FARDC, is stretched thin and facing dozens of armed groups. In Ituri province, militias such as the Codeco and the Islamist ADF continue massacres of civilians. In the Kivus, various Mai community-based militias and remnants of the Rwandan Hutu FDLR insurgents add to the chaos. UN peacekeepers, or the MONUSCO, deployed in the DRC for over 2 weeks and have reported being under fire for their limited success, with nearly 11,000 UN troops still on the ground. MONUSCO has been criticized for failing to protect civilians from militia violence. Local frustrations erupted in deadly protests in the eastern Congo in 2022, where demonstrators stormed UN bases. Dozens were killed, including peacekeepers. The mission had plans to retreat from the region by 2024 under Congolese pressure. But as the security situation deteriorated, Kinshasa paused the pullout and requested the UN to extend its mandate. The irony is palpable. After years of mistrust, the Congolese government now sees the UN as a force of reluctant necessity in order to prevent an all-out collapse. Still, MONUSCO's presence remains deeply unpopular, seen as a symbol of international failure to stabilize the region. All these factors raise a daunting question. Is this the beginning of Congo's disintegration into smaller, warlord-dominated states? Alarmingly, by mid-2025, rebels controlled roughly 20% of the DRC's territory, effectively splitting the country into 2 blocks. M23 has even installed its own parallel administration and taxation in areas it controls, acting as the de facto government in the east. Such fragmentation harks back to the 1960s, when secessionist movements like the mineral-rich Katanga under Moise Tshombe nearly tore the newly independent Congo apart. Today's militants are more decentralized warlords, but the risk of balkanization is a constant fear in the Congolese psyche. Analysts note that Rwanda's backing of M23 may have long-term aims to create a client region in the eastern Congo, effectively annexing a resource-rich buffer in the area. For now, Congo's central government has vowed to resist fragmentation. President Felix Tshisekedi, re-elected in December 2023 amid a turbulent vote, faces enormous pressure to reconquer the East. National sentiment runs high. Protests in Kinshasa have denounced Rwanda's aggression and even targeted Western embassies for doing too little. The coming months will be decisive. Either Congo state reasserts control, or the country could indeed unravel into a patchwork of fiefdoms ruled by militias and neighboring powers. Next we will discuss what I like to call the blood minerals, the resource curse revisited in the Congo. After all, beneath Congo's conflict lies $1 trillion treasure in minerals. It is often dubbed the blood minerals paradox for the way they fuel violence. The DRC is extraordinarily rich in natural resources, including high-grade cobalt, copper, coltan or tantalum, or as it is more widely known, lithium, gold, tin and diamonds. These minerals are strategic linchpins of the 21st century technological progress machine. Cobalt and lithium are critical for electric car batteries and green energy storage, while coltan, tin and tungsten are vital for smartphones and electronics alike. In fact, more than 2/3 of the world's cobalt supply comes from the DRC, making this one continuous conflict one of the most obvious resource wars of the modern era, and consequently making this particular African country the center of the new scramble for Africa, which is underway. Tragically, Congo's immense mineral wealth has often been more curse than blessing for its people. Armed groups in the East frequently fight over mines and trade routes, using profits from minerals like gold, tin and coltan to fund their insurgencies. During the 1998-2003 war, Rwanda and Uganda notoriously plundered Congolese resources. A UN panel in 2001 found that foreign armies and local warlords collaborated to smuggle out gold, diamonds and coltan. Today's M23 rebellion is no exception to that rule. The rebels have captured strategic diamond areas and border crossings, and they have imposed illegal taxes on the mineral trade, earning an estimated $1 million per month by extorting miners and traders alike. M23 even seized the coltan-rich town of Rubaya and smuggles at least 120 tons of coltan ore monthly into Rwanda. Rwanda's official gold exports skyrocketed to become its #1 export, even though Rwanda has few gold mines. Most of that gold is suspected to be looted from the Congo. In short, the global demand for Congo's minerals directly finances and incentivizes the conflict. As one report puts it, Congo's mineral wealth is the invisible driver of both opportunity and destruction. Major multinational corporations are deeply entwined in this resource saga. Tech and electric vehicle giants such as Apple, Google, Tesla, Microsoft and others rely on Congolese cobalt and tantalum in their supply chains. This dependence has raised uncomfortable questions about corporate complicity in human rights abuses. For example, an estimated 40,000 of the 255,000 cobalt miners in the Congo are children, some as young as 6 years old. These children dig in primitive, unsafe conditions for a few dollars a day, confronting cave-ins and toxic exposure. In 2019, a group of Congolese families sued several US tech companies, accusing them of knowingly abetting forced child labor after their kids were killed or maimed in tunnel collapses. The lawsuits documented how children were driven by extreme poverty to work in artisanal cobalt pits for as little as $2 a day, often to the profit of foreign mining firms. And while a US court ultimately dismissed the case on jurisdictional grounds, the grim facts sparked international outrage. Human rights groups have likened Congo's mineral mines to modern-day slavery. In one Cobalt concession, industrial mining expansion led to mass forced evictions. Entire villages displaced so companies could excavate beneath their homes. The environmental toll is severe as well. Unregulated mining pollutes rivers, destroys landscapes, and endangers wildlife in one of the world's most biodiverse rainforests. Compounding the issue is a global scramble for Congo's minerals among world powers. On one hand, Western companies like Glencore have long invested in Congolese mining, but they face competition from Chinese state-owned mining giants that have gained a dominant foothold in the region. Over the past decade, Chinese firms have acquired some of the DRC's biggest mines, supplanting a previous generation of American and European owners. Today's China controls an estimated of 70% of Congo's mining sector and purchases over 40% of its mineral exports. In 2007, Beijing struck a landmark minerals for infrastructure deal, the Sicomines Agreement, as it was later known, pledging to build roads and hospitals in exchange for copper and cobalt rights. While this deal brought some investment, critics note that Congo received only a fraction, 822 million of the promised 3 billion by 2023 in infrastructure, and that the Chinese consortium enjoys hefty tax exemptions. In early 2024, President Tshisekedi's government renegotiated the pact, securing an expanded $7 billion infrastructure commitment and a small annual royalty. It's a delicate balancing act. Kinshasa seeks better terms from China while also courting Western investors to not pull all eggs in the basket. Russia too has signaled interest in the Congo and in its minerals amid its broader push into Africa. Though not historically a big player in the DRC, Moscow has been increasing military and economic outreach across Africa's resource-rich countries. Observers note that Russia's Wagner mercenaries have exploited gold in Sudan, and they have also exploited it in the Central African Republic. So the precedent is already there. Congo's cobalt is likewise a tantalizing prize for Russia's geopolitical ambitions. In 2023, Congolese officials engaged with Russia for potential mining and energy deals, and Russia has offered to help with security training of their armed forces. This emerging freeway contest, Western versus Chinese versus Russian influence, essentially amounts to a new scramble for Africa, with the DRC at the center. The global economy is undeniably complicit in Congo's crisis, insofar as international demand and foreign meddling in pursuit of minerals have fueled conflict and corruption. Every smartphone or electric car battery has a bit of Congo in it. And as long as the first world consumption relies on third world raw materials extracted under chaotic conditions, the DRC's turmoil cannot be seen in isolation. It is a mirror reflecting the dark side of globalization. But the key questions remain. How complicit is the global economy in Congo's perpetual crisis? In light of the evidence, from tech companies sourcing conflict-tainted cobalt to neighboring states smuggling riches, the answer seems to be heavily complicit. Congo's so-called curse is less about the minerals themselves than the rapacious international appetite for them, combined with abysmally poor governance. The onus is now on global industries, in so much as they need to clean up supply chains through strict traceability and ethical sourcing initiatives, and on world powers to support rather than exploit Congo's effort at reform. Without that, any talk of a clean energy transition or corporate social responsibility rings hollow against the reality on the ground in the DRC's mines. Now let's discuss corporate geopolitics. Who are the hidden players behind this immense country and this war for resources? Beyond the flag-waving nations and rebel commanders, a shadowy web of multinational corporations, private contractors and oligarchs influence Congolese politics and security. The DRC's instability has often been lucrative for business interests operating in the shadows. At the peak of the Second Congo War, for example, dozens of foreign mining companies struck deals with warlords, factions, or the Kinshasa government to extract minerals in exchange for cash or arms. This practice has evolved but not entirely disappeared. Corporate-backed militias and private military contractors have become part of the conflict ecosystem, turning parts of the Congo into a corporate playground for those seeking profit amid chaos. One stark example is the recent deal involving Eric Prince, the American founder of the infamous Blackwater security firm. In April 2025, it was revealed that Prince struck an agreement with the Congolese government to help secure and tax the country's mineral wealth. The agreement, reached behind closed doors, aims to deploy Prince's private advisors to improve Congo's meager mineral revenue collection, much of which is lost to smuggling and graft. Notably, the deal was signed just before the M23 rebels had their famous January 2025 offensive that captured Goma and Bukavu. Prince's team intended to operate in eastern Congo, but with Goma now under rebel control, the plans have shifted to start in the safer copper belt of Katanga in the south. According to sources, Prince's advisors will focus first on major copper and cobalt mines in Katanga, where an estimated $40 million per month in mineral exports was believed to be evading taxation. The contract ostensibly does not involve Prince's men in combat roles, and no mercenaries will be sent to the front lines, or at least officially. Still, the optics are striking. A private businessman with a history in military contracting is now tasked with the role akin to a resource tsar in the DRC. This underscores how outsiders with deep pockets and private armies can influence Congolese affairs from behind the curtain. It also dovetails with US strategic interests. The deal emerged as Kinshasa pitched a mineral for security partnership to Washington, essentially offering critical minerals access in return for help against the rebels. Leaning on Prince, a figure with ties to the former Trump administration and the current Trump administration as well, suggests some in the US see outsourcing as a way to counter China's dominance in the Congo. Major mining companies also exert considerable influence in the region, even if they do so often out of the public eye. Glencore, a Swiss-based commodities giant, is one of the DRC's biggest investors, controlling huge cobalt and copper mines in the Katanga region. It has been accused of bribing officials and cutting opaque deals during the Kabila era, locking in a sweetheart mining right deal. Another notorious figure is Dan Gertler, an Israeli mining magnate and close friend to ex-president Joseph Kabila. Gertler acted as a middleman in numerous mining deals, allegedly robbing the Congolese state of billions in revenues through underpriced sales of mining assets. The US Treasury sanctioned Gertler in 2017 for opaque and corrupt mining and oil deals that enriched him and Kabila's circle at the expense of the Congolese people. There was talk in 2021 and 2022 of easing those sanctions if Gertler divested, but many NGOs warned against letting a corrupt dealmaker off the hook. The Gertler saga highlights how kleptocratic networks involving businessmen, politicians and fixers have long siphoned off the DRC's wealth, undermining its governance in the process. Even after Kabila's exit, these networks don't disappear overnight. They often reconfigure under new patrons. There are also cases of private security firms guarding mining sites or even arming local security. Multinationals frequently hire security contractors to protect their operations in lawless areas. In some instances, these arrangements blur into full-blown militarization. For example, a Chinese mining company might fund local police or militias to ward off artisanal miners and rebels near its concession, raising tensions with communities. And Western companies, constrained by laws and reputational risks, sometimes indirectly benefit from locals who secure supply routes by any means necessary. The 2010 US Dodd-Frank Act attempted to choke off funding for armed groups by requiring supply chain diligence for conflict minerals, be they tin, tantalum, tungsten or gold. While the Dodd-Frank Act had some limited initial impact on corporate sourcing, many armed groups simply shifted to other resources, like cobalt, which was not covered by the law, or found ways around the traceability checks. Thus, conflict financing continues in new forms, and, if some reports are to be believed, they have even increased exponentially since the legislation went into effect. All of this points to a broader hypocrisy and ethical quandary. Western governments publicly support Congo's sovereignty and development, yet Western companies and allies have historically profited from its instability. The United States and Europe often tout democracy and human rights, but for years they were relatively muted around Rwanda and Uganda's plundering of Congo, because those countries were security partners. Only recently, as the carnage mounts, have Western powers begun to openly reprimand Kigali. In early 2023, the US Treasury sanctioned Rwandan officials linked to M23 exploitation of minerals, including a Rwandan general who served as a liaison to the rebels. The EU likewise imposed sanctions on M23 leaders and even a Rwandan gold refinery, Gasabo Gold, accused of laundering the Congolese gold. These moves mark a significant shift, essentially admitting that parts of the Rwandan state apparatus are benefiting from Congo's plunder. Yet at the same time, Western nations maintain close ties with Rwanda for other reasons. For instance, we have the United Kingdom's controversial asylum deal with Rwanda, or the United States counter-terrorism training. This disconnect between rhetoric and reality fuels African perceptions of Western hypocrisy. But if you thought the West was hypocritical, wait to see what China is doing. On the other side, China's role is often characterized by Realpolitik economic diplomacy. Beijing offers loans, infrastructure and no-strings-attached deals which appeal to African leaders tired of Western lectures. China has built roads and hospitals in Congo that are visible and appreciated, even if the terms heavily favor Chinese firms. However, Chinese companies have also been accused of environmental destruction, labor abuses, and heavy bribery, similar to their Western counterparts, the difference being largely in their approach. China emphasizes state-to-state relationships and presents itself as a partner in development, not overtly commenting on human rights or governance. Both Western and Chinese actors, in truth, have benefited from a weak Congolese state. It is easier to cut lucrative deals or exploit resources where regulations and oversight are minimal. Thus, who benefits most from a weak and divided Congo, you may ask? Arguably, both unscrupulous multinationals and certain neighboring states do. A fragmented Congo is easier to divide and plunder. Warlords can be bought off for access to a mine. Small proxy militias can secure a supply line, and an impoverished local population provides cheap labor for the mining pits. Meanwhile, the central government struggles to assert control or collect revenues, perpetuating a cycle of dependency on foreign interests. In summary, the hidden hands of corporate and geopolitical players mean the Congo's conflict is never purely internal. They are enmeshed in a global economic web. Any solution will require not just peace talks among militias, but also greater transparency in mining deals, enforcement of anti-corruption measures, and accountability for companies operating in conflict zones. Shining light on these hidden players is crucial. As long as shadowy deals and private armies operate in the darkness, the Congolese people's aspirations for peace and prosperity will remain ever elusive. Then we have Rwanda's Gambit. Is it for regional dominance or regional war? In the Great Lakes region, Rwanda looms large despite its small size. President Paul Kagame's Rwanda has become a pivotal actor in East Central Africa, and its incursions into Eastern Congo reflects a high-stakes gambit. What does Rwanda seek in the DRC, and is it risking a wider regional war for short-term gains, you may ask? Well, from Kigali's perspective, the first priority is security. Ever since the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, the new Kagame-led government has pursued genocidaires who fled into the Congo. In the late 1990s, Rwanda twice invaded the then Zaire DRC to eliminate the Hutu extremist FDLR militia that took sanctuary in the Congolese jungles. Rwanda argues that Kinshasa failed to disarm these forces, forcing Rwanda to act in self-defense beyond its borders. The security rationale still features in Rwandan rhetoric. The presence of FDLR, though much diminished now, and periodic anti-Tutsi violence in the eastern Congo are cited as threats. M23's origins indeed trace back to an earlier Tutsi rebel group integrated into the Congolese army and then rebelling again in 2012 over broken peace agreements. Many M23 fighters are Congolese Tutsis who claim to protect their communities. However, beyond legitimate security concerns, Rwanda's involvement has already taken on a larger strategic and economic dimension. Kagame's ambitions appear to include positioning Rwanda as a regional power broker and economic hub. Under Kagame, Rwanda has cultivated an image of stability, high economic growth, and tech-friendly governance, attracting Western aid and investment. But Rwanda is resource poor, densely populated and landlocked. Access to Eastern Congo's land and resources offers an enticing outlet for them. It is no secret, after all, that Rwanda has profited immensely from Congolese minerals over the past 2 decades. As noted, gold smuggled from the DRC became Rwanda's top export by value, and Coltan and other Congolese ores are regularly sold as Rwandan in origin. By leveraging proxy groups like M23, Rwanda gains de facto control over border areas and trade. The Rwandan military and elite are implicated in illicit resource extraction networks and that siphon wealth into Rwanda's coffers while depriving Congo of the revenue. In essence, critics say Kagame's regime uses the Banyamulenge Tutsi cause as a cover to pursue geopolitical and economic ambitions inside the Democratic Republic of Congo. Even some Congolese Tutsi leaders have lamented beyond pawns. As one remarked, some people in Rwanda would like to use the Banyamulenge community like a ladder to come and intervene into the Congo. Regionally, Rwanda's assertiveness has caused friction with virtually all of its neighbors at time. Uganda, led by President Museveni, was once an ally. Rwandan and Ugandan forces jointly invaded Congo in 1998, but they later fell out and even clashed militarily in Kisangani in 2000 over spoils of war. In recent years, a rivalry developed as both countries vied for influence in eastern DRC and accused each other of harboring each other's dissidents. By 2019, Rwanda closed its borders with Uganda amid espionage allegations. The M23 resurgence saw hints of renewed cooperation between Kigali and Kampala. Some reports suggest Uganda also gave M23 a degree of support. Trust, up to this point, remains low between the two capitals. Especially after Rwanda was accused of backing a failed coup in Burundi in 2015. Both countries have rebel groups sheltering in the eastern Congo. Burundian rebels like the Red Tabara operate there, and Rwanda accuses Burundi of hosting FDLR remnants. This tangled web means the fighting in the eastern DRC can easily entangle Rwanda, Uganda and Burundi in a web of proxy wars on Congolese soil, or even spark direct interstate clashes. Tanzania and other states of the Southern African Development Community, or the SADC, also take interest. Tanzania led a UN brigade that defeated M23 in 2013, and SADC countries like South Africa and Malawi have contributed troops to MONUSCO's intervention brigade. They have little patience for Rwanda's meddling. In 2013, a public spat saw Tanzania's president bluntly tell Kagame to negotiate with rebels, straining relations between the two nations. As of 2025, SADC peacekeepers from South Africa, Malawi, and so on and so forth are again in the Congo, and at least 17 peacekeepers have been killed in combat with M23. Some of those casualties are Rwandan soldiers fighting under the UN flag for the Congolese side, a grim twist that would pit Rwandan troops against each other on opposite sides if tension escalates further. So, is Rwanda's overplaying its hand and courting a regional war? There are growing indications that the answer could be yes. The fall of Goma to M23 in early 2025 alarmed the entire region, bringing back nightmare scenarios of the 1990s into the collective psyche of the entirety of Africa. The African Union, East African Community, or the EAC, and the UN have all called for de-escalation. Kenya had deployed an EAC regional force to eastern DRC in 2022, but Congolese distrust, especially of Ugandan and Burundian contingents, hampered its effectiveness. After Goma's capture, Angola and Kenya mediated emergency talks. Notably, Qatar hosted a meeting where Kagame and Tshisekedi, DRC's president, finally sat down together in early 2025. The resulting ceasefire was tenuous and quickly violated in parts. Rwanda's gamble has certainly gotten the world's attention, clearly, but it has done so at a very high cost. After all, if Kinshasa's patience snaps, Congo could formally declare war on Rwanda, or sever all diplomatic ties. It has, after all, already expelled Rwanda's ambassador in 2022. Kagame himself, in July 2025, voiced doubt about the durability of any peace deal, suggesting that the trust between the nations is positively absent. The risk is that continued conflict could draw in multiple national armies again. Congo has defense pacts with neighbors like Angola and Zimbabwe from the old war days, and might invoke them if it feels its territorial integrity is in peril. Rwanda could also find itself facing not just an ill-trained Congolese troops, but a coalition of African forces. For now, diplomacy holds, and these scenarios seem to stay in check. But the situation is volatile. Even within Rwanda, there are questions about succession. Kagame has, after all, been in power for over 20 years now, and whether the hardline approach to Congo is sustainable. Kagame's Gambit aims to cement Rwanda's regional dominance and economic gains, yet it may end up isolating Rwanda. Already Western donors have frozen some aid to Rwanda over the M23 issue, and sanctions on Rwandan individuals have been imposed. Should a wider war erupt, Rwanda's vaunted economic progress could be jeopardized, and the Great Lakes as a whole would suffer a massive economic setback. In sum, Rwanda's walking a fine line. It seeks to be the arbiter of Eastern Congo's fate, securing its border and benefiting from Congo's wealth. But by doing so through military proxies, it has inflamed regional tensions. The key question remains: is Rwanda risking regional war for short-term gains? The evidence suggests that the current course is indeed perilous. Short-term, Rwanda has expanded its influence and indeed enriched itself. Long-term, however, it faces the prospect of international blowback and possible conflagration, and if this happens, the conflagration will not be easy to control. A peaceful outcome would require Rwanda to recalibrate its strategy, shifting from armed intervention to diplomatic cooperation and legitimate trade. The onus is also on the international community and African Union to address Rwanda's security concerns while affirming that Congo's sovereignty is indeed inviolable. Otherwise, the Great Lakes region could again slide into a multi-state war, and the consequences of which would be devastating for both Africa and the international economy. Now, we can easily affirm that Congo is at a crossroads between fragmentation or national rebirth. As the Democratic Republic of Congo confronts this perilous moment, it finds itself at a crossroads. The scenarios ahead range from bleak fragmentation to a hopeful rebirth under new political arrangements. Could Congo disintegrate into autonomous regions and many states ruled by warlords? Or can it reinvent its governance, perhaps through federalism or power sharing, to hold together a nation the size of the entirety of Western Europe? One possible trajectory is that de facto fragmentation. In many ways, this is already happening in the East. Kinshasa's writ does not run in large swaths of North Kivu and South Kivu and Ituri alike. If the current conflict persists, or indeed worsens, we could see a semi-permanent partition of the country. Eastern Congo might remain under militia control or foreign influence. For example, a Rwanda-aligned proto-state in North Kivu, while the western and central parts of the DRC continue under the official government's rule. Such an outcome would resemble the situation during the Second Congo War, when the country was split between multiple rebel administrations, backed by different neighboring countries. It would be a humanitarian and governance nightmare, likely characterized by warlordism, lawlessness, and ongoing resource plunder. Smaller states carved out of Congo would probably be weak and unstable, potentially at constant war with each other. Most Congolese strongly oppose any formal balkanization of their country, and the DRC's constitution is fiercely unitary. Yet the risk is that informal fragmentation could solidify simply because the central state cannot reassert control. We might end up with an Eastern Congo that, while not internationally recognized as separate, is effectively outside Kinshasa's control for years, similar to Somalia's breakaway regions or Sudan before the separation. Another pathway is renewed national cohesion through political reform. Some analysts argue that one root of Congo's instability is the over-centralization nature of its governance. Kinshasa is geographically and psychologically distant from the peripheries of their territory. Historically, promises of decentralization have been made. The DRC officially transitioned from 11 provinces to 26 smaller provinces in 2015 to give local authorities more voice. But the implementation has been lagging at best, and provincial governments often lack resources. Federalism is a concept that periodically arises in Congolese discourse. Proponents say that a federal system or a more robust decentralization could allow regions like Kivu or Katanga to manage more of their own security and development, diffusing secessionist pressures. However, federalism in Congo is highly controversial. Many recall that calls for federalism in the 1960s were seen as cover for secession. President Kasavubu favored a form of federalism, which Lumumba opposed, fearing it would empower separatists. In the current context, federalism may be viewed with suspicion, but it could also be simply seen as empowering regional warlords and legitimizing what rebels have taken by force. For instance, if North Kivu were given autonomous status, is that solving the conflict or rewarding M23's insurgency? These are tough questions. Nonetheless, some kind of political accommodation for Eastern communities will be necessary in any peace deal. This could involve integrating rebel leaders into provisional governments, creating special economic zones, or granting amnesty in exchange for disarmament. All delicate steps to prevent a relapse into full-scale fighting. The future of the Congo's highly fragile democracy also hangs in the balance. The Democratic Republic of Congo has attempted a democratic trajectory in the past 15 years with mixed results. After decades of Mobutu's dictatorship and then Kabila's rule, the first relatively free elections in 2006 and 2011 were marred by irregularities. The 2018 election, which brought President Felix Tshisekedi to power, was historic for the peaceful transfer of power, but allegations persisted of a backroom deal with outgoing President Joseph Kabila. Most recently, in December 2023, Congo held elections that finally gave Tshisekedi a second term with 73% of the vote, though opposition candidates denounced the process as a sham. Still, the fact that the election was held and did not immediately plunge the country into a nationwide violence is a sign of some democratic resilience building. Looking ahead, if conflict continues, it will severely undermine democratic institutions. Parts of the country under rebel control could not vote, and the focus shifts from governance to survival. Conversely, if a peace can be secured, there is a vibrant civil society and outspoken media environment in Congo ready to push for reforms. Congolese civil society, including the churches, human rights organizations, women's groups, and youth movements like Lucha, has shown remarkable resilience through dark times. They have organized protests against abuses, campaigned for elections when politicians stalled, and helped mediate local conflicts. The Catholic Church inside the DRC, for example, deployed thousands of election observers in 2018 and courageously reported discrepancies. Figures like Dr. Denis Mukwege, Nobel Peace Prize laureate for aiding rape survivors, represent the moral outcry of Congolese society against war and impunity, and he has even hinted at entering politics to champion reform. Thus, even as war rages, there are embers of hope. The sheer determination of the Congolese people to not see their nation fall apart should not be underestimated. In Kinshasa and other relatively stable areas, ordinary citizens continue to strive for a normal life. Entrepreneurs run businesses, students attend university, all acts of quiet defiance against the chaos. Should the tide turn, for instance, if a credible peace agreement neutralizes the M23 and foreign meddling ceases, Congo could embark on a path of rebuilding akin to other post-conflict societies. The country's vast resources, if harnessed transparently, could finance development rather than war. For this to happen, governance reforms and anti-corruption efforts are key. Encouragingly, in 2024, a new government took office, including the first ever female prime minister in the DRC's history, signaling the desire for renewal. The government has pledged to strengthen the presence and credibility of the state, improve governance, and push ahead with reforms to restore stability and peace in the nation. These are more than just buzzwords. They will be the pillars upon which Congo could potentially experience its rebirth if, and it's a pretty big if, it manages not to collapse into another decade of conflict. Ultimately, can Congo reimagine itself, or is fragmentation inevitable? I'm afraid that the answer is not predetermined. It will depend on the choices of both Congolese leaders and the international community in the coming months and years. If the cycle of exploitation and conflict is not broken, fragmentation, in fact, if not in law, could become a self-fulfilling prophecy for Congo. But if inclusive dialogue, justice, and smart power sharing can take root, the DRC could instead head towards a second independence of sorts. freeing itself from being a pawn on others' chessboard and realizing the potential of its unity and diversity. The stakes could not be higher. The fate of this nation of 100 million people will reverberate far beyond its borders. And now, for your favorite segment, let's discuss the big picture. Why Congo's fate matters to the world. Stepping back, the turmoil in the Democratic Republic of Congo is not just a Central African crisis. It is a crucible of 21st century geopolitics, economics and ethics. The DRC's fate will tell us how the future of Africa looks and how the international system handles the paradox of great wealth amid great poverty. First, let's consider the global energy transition and tech revolution. The world's drive to adopt electric vehicles, smartphones and renewable energy hinges on secure supplies of key minerals, and Congo is a linchpin of those supply chains. As noted, over 70% of the world's cobalt and sizable portions of its coltan, lithium and copper come from the DRC. If Congo implodes, the shock to global industries could be severe. Prices for these commodities would spike and ethical sourcing would become even harder to ensure. This is a deep irony in the possibility that the pursuit of green technology could be destabilizing a country, a point not lost on observers who talk of clean cars with bloody batteries. The international community thus has a selfish interest, as well as a moral one, in helping stabilize the DRC. A secure, well-governed Congo could be a reliable supplier of the minerals powering the 21st century. A chaotic Congo, by contrast, could become a choke point, with supply disruptions or minerals falling under monopolistic controls of a single foreign power, or even a cartel of armed groups. In a world increasingly defined by mineral competition in Africa, how Congo is managed will help define global norms. Do we exploit at any cost, or do we find ways to source responsibly and invest in local development? Second, we have Congo's situation, which illuminates the broader pattern of great power competition in Africa. Much like the 19th century Scramble for Africa, which was driven by European powers carving colonies, today we see a new scramble driven by economic and strategic motives. China's dominance in Congo's mining sector is one front in its worldwide quest for resource and influence under the Belt and Road Initiative. Western countries, awakening to this reality, are belatedly trying to re-engage in the area. The US has launched initiatives for critical mineral security partnerships and has elevated diplomacy in the Great Lakes. For example, they have been appointing special envoys in the area. Russia, though constrained economically, uses security relationships and propaganda to gain footholds where it can. For instance, they have been offering mercenaries or arms in exchange for mining concessions. The DRC has thus become a testing ground for whether African countries can benefit from this competition or be victimized by it. Will outside powers treat the DRC as a partner or a pawn? The answer may foretell how Africa as a whole is treated in the emerging multipolar world system. Notably, Africa is poised to have 40% of the world's population by the end of the century. The continent's importance is rising inexorably, and with it comes the need to resolve conflicts like Congo's in a way that empowers Africans. If the world continues to see African countries merely as sources of raw materials or arenas for proxy battles, we will witness more state failures and humanitarian crises resulting in huge waves of refugees towards Western nations. However, if a new paradigm of engagement based on respect and mutual benefit takes hold, there is hope for a more stable and prosperous Africa. Congo is a bellwether in this regard. It is often said that when Congo sneezes, Central Africa catches a cold. Its conflicts spill into neighbors, and its stability can anchor the entire region. By the same token, how the world handles Congo's problems is a measure of the international commitment to peace beyond platitudes. Furthermore, the DRC saga underscores lessons about the resource curse and governance that apply globally. Countries from Venezuela all the way to Iraq have struggled with the paradox of plenty. Congo is an extreme case where weakness of institutions allowed foreign exploitation and internal decay to feed on each other. But it also shows that solutions must be comprehensive. Peacekeeping alone can't fix it. Elections alone can't fix it. Mining investment alone can't fix it. A holistic approach is required, one that includes security, political inclusion, and economic transparency. The World Bank, the United Nations, the African Union, and regional blocs all have roles to play. Encouragingly, there have been coordinated efforts like the Addis Ababa Peace Framework of 2013 and the more recent Nairobi and Luanda processes aiming to get at the root of the causes, including the ever-present resource curse, as one commentary noted. Whether these initiatives truly gain traction remains to be seen. Finally, one must ask, is the world ready to see Africa, and specifically the Democratic Republic of Congo, as more than a chessboard for great power competition? The hope is that the answer will be yes. The human cost of treating Congo purely through a Realpolitik lens has been staggering. Millions dead, generations stunted by poverty and trauma. If the DRC can emerge from this crisis with its regional integrity intact and a measure of peace, it will send a powerful message that even the most seemingly intractable conflicts can be resolved when local and global stakeholders align their interests for peace. It will also validate the efforts of countless unsung heroes on the ground. The doctors, the teachers, the activists and honest officials who have not given up on their country. In conclusion, Congo's brink of collapse moment is a clarion call. It is a call to Congolese leaders to unite and govern justly, to regional players like Rwanda and Uganda to prioritize long-term stability over short-term spoils, and to global powers and corporations to finally match rhetoric with action in supporting Congo's development. The 21st century world order will be shaped in places like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, as much as in the halls of Washington or in Beijing. Whether we move towards a more just and cooperative international system or fall back into neo-colonial patterns of exploitation may well hinge on outcomes in places like the Congo. The DRC's struggle is thus a defining story of our time, a story of blood and minerals, war and great games at play, but hopefully also one day a story of national rebirth and resilience against all odds. As a final thought, the question is, Congo on the brink can be answered in two ways. Yes, it is on the brink of potential state collapse, disintegration, and endless bloodbath, or of a turning point towards a new political order. The coming years will reveal which it will be. For now, as Realpolitik Confidential would advise, we must strip away the ideologies and look at the hard realities, but also remember the human stakes. In Congo, as in much of Africa, those who suffer most from geopolitics are ordinary people who ask only for the chance to live in peace. Ensuring they get that chance is a responsibility that history has placed on all of us, Africans and non-Africans alike. After all, Africa is not poor. Africa, unfortunately, is being looted again. Only this time it's not colonial flags being raised with fanfare and pomp and circumstances. It's corporate logos and data centers and strategic partnerships, which are rather one-sided. The world says it wants Congo to succeed. The world says it supports African sovereignty. But look closer, because behind all the headlines, the supply chains and the silence lies a truth we dare not admit. Congo is the mirror, and what we see in it is greed, hypocrisy, and indifference. It's not Congo alone disintegrating, it's the entire international community's so-called values. It is our own values. Thank you for listening to episode 11 of Realpolitik Confidential. I have been your host, Alex Krishan. Stay safe out there, God bless you all, and let's hope for a more just, peaceful, and safe African continent. Goodbye.